Pranam.
Namaskar, everyone. Um, it's yeah, kind of sad that this is the last session of the wonderful journey through the language of tabla. As you could feel during the course of these past 5 sessions we had, this is not something that can be referred to as out of the blue. This is something that has been in me, within me, for since the inception, perhaps ever since I was introduced to the language of tabla. And the common human tendency, even in a child, what does it mean? What does it convey? So, in those lines, the thoughts went on together with feeling, and here we are today to discuss the language of tabla from a realistic point of view. So today we're going to take a heuristic approach to the expressive and communicative possibilities in the language of tabla. We will do that by studying a few different compositions of different types presented in different ways. We all know there are different types of compositions, and I will present some of them to you. And I would ask you to listen very closely to the different versions of the different composition of the same composition. Make your own individual assessment, and those assessments particularly stay focused on the expressive element in them. What you feel, what you hear in them, what are they trying to say. And everyone is hearing these compositions in their own ways, and all of them, believe it, they're all legitimate, equally valid. So I would ask you to listen very closely to the different versions of the same composition. Make your own individual assessment, mainly pertaining to the expressive elements in them, and share those observations with me. In your sharing, you are welcome to maintain or request anonymity or confidentiality, if you please. Some of you may find it a little challenging trying to find meaning in abstract. Yet, however challenging it may seem, please give it a try. Please remember how we relate to the sky, applying different attributes like gloomy or bright. Thinking deeply, we may realize that these expressions are primarily our own responses applied to the condition of the sky. The sky is not gloomy. This is exactly how I feel looking at the sky at that particular moment. So we are applying our own feelings, our own responses onto every natural object. Thinking deep. So in this process of making sense out of an abstract language as part of semantics, you may recognize the use of some of the elements we had nurtured in the earlier sessions, such as content, tone, stress or accent, tempo, dynamics, space, and rhythmic changes. You may also notice some new elements often found in all forms of language, such as repetition. Although repetition in certain cases may be identified or referred to as intellectual limitation, failure, or a type of mental disability or disease or disorder, yet there are innumerable examples of the purposeful use of repetition in music, particularly in tabla, all kinds of music. We sometimes say that repetition is one of the main symptoms of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. But from our early childhood, if you are asking for something, we repeat. How repetition in the language of tabla is being used as to create an ending, the high element where we repeat the same phrase 3 times, and so many other instances of use of repetition. Why we use repetition? Big question. Find your own answer. But it is definitely there, purposefully used in music. When we make variations of a qaida theme, as part of the standard rule, we repeat the theme in the variation. When we apply the same principle in making variations of chalan, it feels quite awkward and even monotonous because of the length. Chalans are much longer than qaida, so meaning repeating the theme over and over again, it can become a little monotonous, and master tabla players sometimes would use their own skill, own approach to break the monotony, break out of the monotony. But here we come another aspect, length. Length is another such aspect we should certainly like to include into our studies. Some compositions are intentionally short, embracing the coveted brevity in expression, while others are enjoying the long ride. So why we have these different lengths of compositions, even within the same type? And sometimes just that brief spell is enough. Sometimes we need more time. There are many other similar interesting aspects in our day-to-day use of language which draws similarity in our use of the language of tabla. There are such as the use of common phrases such as with the same meaning, use of common phrases with slightly different meanings, use of slightly different phrases with different meanings, and then the regional differences. For example, same language spoken differently in different regions. So I will give you examples. For tignak is one such phrase I've mentioned earlier. In Punjab, they would say dena tak. Regional differences in the application of the same word or phrase, etc. Additionally, there are certain elements which are particularly associated with art and creation, such as pattern. Finding and creating patterns is one of the most primitive tendencies in human mind. We always do that. We're looking at the sky. If you look at the sky for 2 minutes, that's it. We start looking for patterns. Looking at the ocean, we'll start looking for the patterns in the waves. And in the same way, here, that's finding patterns and then applying them in our own creations is a very common thing. In the language of tabla, we use patterns quite frequently and quite freely also. either in compositional approach or improvisational. There are also several elements in tabla which connects it with different branches of science. And we know that science came out of philosophy. And then also the root of science is mathematics. And all aspects of mathematics you can we often use in teaching a lot of reference to mathematics. So with that being said, I would now illustrate play a few compositions in different ways. Not always different ways, but listen to them and make notes, your personal notes of when you are listening to the composition closely. I might actually repeat, giving you opportunities to listen again and again and make your personal notes, and that just openly, freely share your feelings, what you felt. And just remember, every feeling is equally legitimate. A brief composition. I'm playing, this is composition 2, so that those who are not familiar with the compositions, so far I was playing a brief composition. You can mark it as composition 1. This is composition 2. Let's just take up these two compositions. Would you mind sharing what you heard in them? Composition 1 and 2.
Hi, Guruji.
Hi.
Yeah, on the second one, I thought it was getting its beauty from the the difference in the time changes. Okay, I mean the difference in the speed. You go up, down, and that's where it was getting its if you will, its beauty from. The first one I was feeling very Patology. Uh, it's about the only way I can say it was getting strong emphasis on the clarity and
Okay.
strength of the strokes.
Mhm.
That's about the best way I can put it.
Anybody else would like to share?
I think the use of space in the first one really makes me listen more. I think um, just because when there's a lot going on all the time, it's hard to pinpoint a certain thing to listen to. But when there's a lot of space, it's really easy to focus in.
Mhm.
Hi, Samir.
Hi.
Um, so the first composition, what it felt to me was anticipatory and even a bit formal. It's almost as if I were to dance to it. I would dance to it very precisely, and I would hold meaningful poses, and I would really pay attention and stay with the spaces that's in the first one. And it's very assuring, and it feels very assuring, and it feels very confident also. And for me, the second one, oh dear, where did it go? The second one felt passionate, and it felt um, more liberated, more liberty in the flow to me, and yeah, and spontaneous also. Um, it sounds more im- improvisatory to me, like it because it feels very spontaneous.
And since the microphone is open here, I'm Fred. I'll lean over and chime in. The first one felt inquisitive and open minded to me. The second one, I had a feeling of playfulness and a kind of mischievous joy.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else would like to share?
So the first composition, to me, it appeared to be very bright and open. A lot of pakwaj type of loud sounds, probably used more in dance. And then I like the way it went to a muted close at the end. And for the second one, I think it's a Chakradar, it was also open, uh, more emotional, more Veer Rasa type of emotion is what I kind of got from that one.
Thank you. Now I'm going to play a composition in two different ways. Second way.
Hi, Gurji. So I just moved in, so it looks a bit different behind me. So when I heard the first part, the first way you played that there, it felt like it was very straightforward. So everything was played the same way, and it almost felt like when you're just like waiting for something to happen, you're just standing in line, and there's just like they're just moving people through the line really quickly. So it's very if you get what I mean, there's a like a procedure to the whole thing. You're just playing the same thing, just getting through it. The second one felt more I don't know, more less sanitized almost because you were adding those different sorts of modulations, and it was getting like louder and quieter at times. So it felt like the first one was very sterile, and the second one was a lot more or a lot less sanitized, in my opinion.
Can I hear that again?
Oh, sure, sure. The first one was number two.
So clearly a lot more Bayan elaboration, which is nice. But the first one, actually, to me in this moment, um, sounds a little more pleasant, a little more soothing. Although, yes, more monotone and subdued with the Bayan. Sometimes,
I felt
sorry, sometimes what allures me very much is when I hear the Bayan and it's a clear difference, but the buy-in is still subtle. Like as a student, if I were to try to play that, I would try to push the buy-in louder to make up for my deficiency. But sometimes for me, what draws me in is the clear difference, but subtle difference when you just hear just enough buy-in. Anyway, thank you.
Thank, thank
I was looking at that, and the first one seemed like I'm just going to play this composition, okay, and we get through the strokes, and it's going to be right, and it's going to be precise. But there wasn't as much feeling as the second one. The second one, using the biomodulations, gave it more of a more emotion to it. Right? It's the only way to really describe that. Right? I mean, obviously the same strokes in each case, but I found the second one more interesting. I mean, the first one was, yeah, there it is. Okay, here's the kaida, right? And the second one is, okay, we're gonna push this out a little bit, make it more interesting, make it a little more feeling.
So I felt that the first sounded a little more introverted, and the second one sounded a bit more extroverted. Um, and the way I can relate to this is through dynamic and through accents. So the dynamic for the first one would be in classical music, we can call it something like a mezzo piano. So you're playing to a more intimate. It's assumed like you're playing to a bit intimate uh, dialogue, so that it kind of draws you in, draws the audience in, draws the ear into it. And then the second one would be a very projecting kind of aesthetic, um, and so so it's super interesting because there are pieces in Western classical music. Also, there are pianists who will play it very cleanly without any ornaments or any kind of saturation of dynamic, or and keep it very very clean, um, and that's very convincing. And then there are also pianists who are gonna play not pretending that the 19th century didn't happen. So they'll play it with lots of added ingredient in the interpretation in the same composition.
Here's another one. I will just play it one type, and tell me what you notice or what you feel in that.
Um, so to me, this one seemed like more like okay. So for me, it seemed like it was a keka that was played like for few cycles, and that was way more easy for the listener to perceive because it was more distinct. Each of the sounds, each of the notes were more distinct and was more clean. So yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you.
I felt a little surprised with that one because at the end, when it ends like in the middle, or what I thought was the middle of the cycle there, and that was the end. And so I was waiting for it to play and then end with the cave, and instead it kept going, and then it suddenly stopped, and that threw me off. So that was what I was feeling.
Yeah, to add to that, like I did feel like the ending was a little abrupt. Like, but I felt like initially it was like a kind of cycle that was repeating sequence, but then the ending was a little more abrupt.
Here's a very common composition played differently. Two different versions of it. Version 2. Okay.
I was listening for a big difference. I didn't hear that big a difference. Okay.
Here they are again. Number 1. Two.
Energy. I heard that the second composition there's a lot more personality and flavor. There's clearly more buy-in in some areas. In the first composition played, everything was kind of stagnant, very steady, very to the point and straightforward. The second one kind of keeps you guessing, if that makes sense, because it's in different places, different kinds of modulation, different kind of personality. That was my thought on it.
I think the second one had a lot of a faster and sharper articulation and more modulation on the buy-in. I think it contributed to more of a sense of urgency over the second one.
Yeah, there are other comments also coming in the chat, so I'm keeping them confidential. Here's another composition. I will play it just one type. Tell me what you notice in the composition itself. Some of the elements we had discussed in the previous lectures, if you can point out or find any of those elements here.
I love the use of silence in intermittent places to break up the phrasing. I found that really pulled me in as a listener.
Anybody else has any other observation, feeling?
I felt like we were thrown into it because it starts off really fast and loud, and then like at first I didn't really understand what was going on with the composition, and the when you play the the one part twice where it repeats but it doesn't play a third time, and then you actually play the actual sort of tihai at the end, I feel like it goes from I felt really lost at the start, and then it started to become clearer to me how the composition was structured, and then I was able to understand it by the end.
Manav, did you observe anything in this composition?
It sounds very what it seems very complex. It's the way I listen to it.
Did you notice any rhythmic change within the composition?
Rhythmic change as in there's tempo change, as in the tempo of each phrase. It changes.
Any particular spot you can mention?
Like the tihai.
No.
Yeah.
Listen to it again. Right there. There was a change of meter. All of a sudden, very short. Syncopation or up, that's the build-up of the tihai. But that little spot. Now 7. Space. This ending can be presented in so many different ways. Or
Seventh. Yes, Chris.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, please.
Okay. I was just going to comment that, yeah, it was that triplet before, and that your Baya had a lot of slides in the last one, and then your Ks had a different kind of touch. There's a lot of different elements going on the buyout, like the extremely loud. In all of the variations, I'm hearing in the second version an extreme amount of detail and very nuances that my ear is picking up on now. And sometimes your expression of dynamics on the Tahini, but generally, specifically the last composition, we slid through most of the first part of the body.
Now, since
Beautiful,
we're referring to the Baya a lot, I would ask you to now listen closely to the two sections of this composition, the Kuli, the open section, and the closed section, with two different types of Baya application. And make a note of how you are relating to the two sections. I'm taking you back to one of the compositions we have played earlier. It'll be easy for your reference. For your convenience, I'm going to play each section separately a number of times so that you can hear their music, identify their music separately. Section 2.
Registration change.
Mm-hmm.
And of course the speed change.
Yeah.
Because the registration is on the upper register of the instrument, so it wants to lift off and it wants to take off and fly.
Feeling the Kuli, it felt like there was a little sort of a certain emptiness there without the bass of the Baya, right? And so it was lighter. You did feel the lighter feeling as there was no Baya underneath it.
Anybody else would like to participate, like Debu Nayak ji, and happy to see you again, Debu ji, and Adarsh, Tolat, Shankadeep. You're muted.
Good evening, Gurudev, and good evening to everybody. So this is the chalan that you played a little while ago. This is one of my favorites, so I play this all the time. So, but there are two ways of playing, and you showed both ways. One is the Baya accented playing that I would like to call it. It's more Ajrada style of playing. Some people call it. But that sounds to me that's more musical than the first one. The second one is my favorite, and I always like your when you apply your Baya the way you do on this chalan, on this particular chalan, and the variation comes after that. It's very musical. It's very soothing and very musical to your ear, and this as tabla, as we all know it, being a performing art, the performance when it's Baya, it adds more color to it with the Daya Baya combination in in this particular style, and that's the part I like more. So I like to sort of imitate the way you put or stress your emphasis on the Maya itself. I like to imitate that. I like to sort of copy that because it's very soothing to my ear, and if it is played right, it's soothing to the audience as well. Um,
Here,
uh,
here, sorry. Here is another example. Listen to this ancient composition.
yep.
One more time. One more time. Look at the beginning of you notice
Yes.
how it is.
Yeah, you taught us this also. Yeah. So for this one, I call it the building of the storm. You set it up slowly, slowly, and then it ends in a climactic end. And also the Maya has a major role in it. And the way it's the Daya Baya interplay with each other, it's also incredible. But the thing is, the way the composition builds up, that's what appeals to me. Uh, and you taught us this some time ago. It's also one of my favorites too.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I heard the oh sorry I guess I'll quickly I heard the same thing, but it was almost like when you're in like waves, and when the waves are coming in, there's like that rocking, and that's a start where it is still, it's not exactly calm, but it isn't like as fast as it gets. But then right before the when the wave like just crests, there's a moment of real calm, and that's when you basically pause for a second there and you're playing very quietly, and then the wave hits you, and then it's really fast and it's really loud and it's really in your face. So I felt like rather than just starting slow and going up, it's like it almost dips for a second and then really spikes in speed and like sound.
Yeah, yeah, please.
I was really struck by the layering of the different notes, especially the ones that ring and sustain versus the ones who were more like we call staccato. It's the shorter notes. So there's this the layering was just beautiful. It was just beautiful. And so that is just in addition to how it progressed um, in this narrative, in this really intriguing and curious story. It made me really curious, and so yeah.
Anybody else would like to say something? So, thank you. So, fast compositions. It would go through different phases and tell me what you hear. It might continue for a little while. And move from one arena into another, and you can make your own notes.
Lots of different changes in that.
Lots of changes, lots of things happened.
Yeah, I was
Yes,
watching you change
with the
sort
stretch
of
of time, I got that opportunity to go a little deeper into my own expression. Yeah.
started out with sort of straight, not, straight rela. And then you did something with the Turikita. I'm not sure exactly what. Sounded a little bit different, but it wasn't that. And then you put emphasis on the taste. There's more emphasis on the start taste stroke, and then went back, and then you added in Dina, and then everywhere. I don't know quite how to describe the end of it, but it was.
Priyanka, what did you hear?
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, I heard like a very faster version. Like, could you play it one more time for it? Because I heard it and then I heard everyone talk it, like, and I like miss, like,
It won't,
remember. I can't.
okay, it won't be the same thing, but I will play a little bit more for you so
Yeah.
that you can listen, get an opportunity to listen closely and make your notes
Okay.
on something completely different, or maybe same in the same line.
Okay.
Take some
Um.
Dadra in there,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah, Priyanka.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Guruji, for playing that again. So I feel that when you were playing this, it was uh, so there was a lot of transitions that was happening from like a lot of transition in speed and also a lot of variations. There was like I feel like there was a lot of variations and also a transition in speed. So what was happening for me was like when I'm trying to like the moment I'm trying to follow one and I'm trying to anticipate what's going to happen next, the anticipation fails because there's a difference in the variation, whether it's speed or the whole uh, the notes become different. And then the whole change from like I think it started from a much higher speed and then slowly there was a like towards the end it was like more mellow and more like spaced out And I feel like that time it was like it was like more like I don't know, like I mean I can think of it as a graph where it starts with a very like a rough graph, like very condensed with a lot of spikes, and then suddenly it's kind of decaying because the sound kind of eventually mellows down.
I would take a few more comments on before we close up. But one thing I'm listening to all of you so long, so far, there's something very interesting when you listen to music. It's very challenging to listen to music with an unconditioned ear, unconditioned mind. We are always either becoming technical or trying and or struggling to understand, and that doesn't give enough opportunity to our feelings, the area of feeling. How it's very very particularly if you are dealing with this subject for a long time. Say for example, how would you listen to a child who knows nothing but it feels a lot? And sometimes we get so much by listening to the children who are apparently so innocent, but they're yet not so conditioned, not so educated, or not so trained. Their brains not that trained to get into that struggle. Uh, just innocent observations, feelings. So, and music basically, we all often say that it's all about communication, expression, and expression of what? Not so much of intellect, of emotions, thoughts, ideas, philosophies, and then spirituality. How do we tap into that aspect of music, how to benefit out of music? Yes, please. And there might be a few more comments before we close up. Thank you. Yes, please.
Samir, I was very struck by the story in the last composition. It's almost like the first section there. I noticed maybe three sections, but the first section was almost like there were three layers, and the way repetition is so it's always the question I always ask is when I repeat how much is too much and how much is too little and when to stop repeating. And so there are patterns in the first section, and that is layered with a melodic idea from the upper register and the lower register, and then the tempo shift happens. It's almost like there are parallels of three figures, three characters, and then they're all holding hands, and then they have to slow down a little bit in the second section, and then the third section is almost like all of them can finally dance, and then the fast grace notes could echo the beginning section, so that the whole is it makes sense as a whole, um, and the repetition then not just justified but is necessary to set up this dramatic situation. And I just find that so enriching to experience because it's such a metaphor of life. In order to listen to each other, one often have to slow down, um, to stay with the emotion, to stay with the other individual in order to really listen, in order to really hear what is being said. And so the slowing down is was a big moment for me in this composition.
And believe it or not, if you study the theory of Indian music, there's one particular aspect involved in the tal element, the rhythmic element, Dashapran, we call it, 10 salient features or life forces in tal. In one of them is about this movement, gati. And in the ancient times, they had this practice of moving freely between the different tempos. We today believe that it has to be gradual progression upward only, not necessarily. As we hear in Western symphonies, in Indian music also, they understood the meaning and the significance, and freely used different tempos within the same composition. They didn't hesitate to slow down in sections, during the improvisations or within set compositions. Songs were composed in those ways. And if we study the Dashapran element more closely, we will understand that Indian music has, particularly Indian rhythm and the Tala system, had much more philosophical and even spiritual content in it than we perceive today. And it is not just the melody which contributes to the creation of rasas, rhythm, together. The two main components of Indian music, melody and rhythm, hand in hand, they do it together. Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Gurji.
Guruji.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.